Well, welcome along to Jump To It here on irishracing.com. I'm Ed Quigley, and there's going to be lots of fun on today's show. We're going to be looking ahead to some of the special markets at the Cheltenham Festival. I'm sure you've already been on Cheltenham preview nights where you've had about 25-minute dialogues on why Honeysuckle will win the champion hurdle. Well, not today. We're going to jazz it up a little bit. We're looking at the special markets for Cheltenham Festival. We're going to delve into perhaps the trainers, the jockeys, anything beyond. I see there's even markets now on the amounts of beer that will be consumed on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, we're going to have a bit of fun here. And I'd like to bring in my team, of course, regulars to Jump To It. We have Vincent Finegan and Stephen Harris. How are we doing, gents? We good? 3 weeks to go there or thereabouts. Have you got everything sussed? Come to you first, Stephen.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's only 3 weeks left there, isn't it? Not long now, your hashtag, it's actually coming true. The weather forecast doesn't look too bad now, does it? I think it's changed. I don't know. I know you said you'd had a lot of rain up there looking out your office window, but I would imagine we're going to be sort of good to soft, I guess. I don't think we're going to get any of the extremes. It did look quite possible a week or two ago. So that's got to be a factor in considerations. But I haven't had many bets. We'll perhaps discuss one of them later on around the number of Irish winners, which looks a fascinating betting heat.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, still 3 weeks out. A lot can happen in regards to the ground and everything. Vincent, are you somebody who's taking the plunge in the anti-post markets, or is the powder still firmly dry?
It's relatively dry.
Okay.
And the only one that I've been looking at is Run Wild Fred and that 4 miler. I'm into
Yeah.
him from early on. So I'd like to see him run. That's the first thing. I was a bit scared the other day when I saw he had been declared for Navan, which was changed from Sunday into Tuesday, but he didn't run in the end, which was fine. One thing about it over here is we've had heavy ground the last week or so. We've had a lot of rain. We've had some snow today as well. And we've got heavy ground for this weekend. So you'd imagine that a lot of the Cheltenham contenders coming from Ireland, they won't be working on grass for the last few weeks. They'll be mainly on the all-weather surfaces in their own yard. So the next time they're going to see grass is going to be Cheltenham. So that'll be interesting in itself, the fact that they haven't raced on it or worked on it in recent times, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that tricky time of year, isn't it? Where you just want your horses bubble wrapped if you've you're an owner, a trainer, a connection, or even a punter, and you've backed an individual to win it at the Cheltenham Festival. Well, speaking of individuals like to be bubble wrapped sometimes, that is the jockeys who very much do the opposite, doesn't it? It seems to be a 24/7 a job these days. We're going to have a look at the top jockey market. It's a market that definitely interests me here. Paul Townend. Unsurprisingly, is your market leader here, give or take around the even money mark to be top jockey at the festival. We got Rachael Blackmore around 7-2, Davy Russell, Nico de Boinville, Jack Kennedy. The list goes on. I'll come to you first, Stephen. I mean, Paul Townend has to be the first portical. I was having a brief look through this last night in terms of who he could be riding, and I mean, he's stacked for absolute quality in the graded races, and no doubt will get a splattering in the handicaps too. He looks pretty obvious to me. In my view, he should be a little bit shorter. Maybe you see different.
There is a difference of opinion, Ed, isn't there? I mean, I've seen 5-4 on, and I think William Hills are 11-10 against. I mean, 11-10 against does seem a very fair price. You're certainly getting a fantastic package as short-priced favourites. I mean, perhaps as punters and on the day, we might be looking for each way horses against some of these 6-4 on chances, but Paul Townend's going to be riding most of them. Of course, last year, Rachael Blackmore was the leading jockey at the festival with Honeysuckle and a few other rides. You know, she was flying for Henry de Bromhead. I think she's around 9-2 best. I don't think she's that easy to fancy. I can't say I can see that being outstanding value. Henry de Bromhead, we're going to come on to later. His horse has been very quiet for a couple of months now, although he did have a winner in the week and a really good interview afterwards where he was saying that he wasn't that worried and Honeysuckle's flying. But they have been a long, long way below par. So I don't really fancy the second in. I can certainly see a case for Paul Townend at 11-10 being a very fair price.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting point. And bring you in here, Vincent. Obviously, Rachael Blackmore last season conquered all the aforementioned Henry de Bromhead form. I mean, it is what it is. Things can change in an instant, can't they? I suppose a lot of it as well will be perhaps the outside rides she gets and other jockeys do get. I remember last year she had rides for Rebecca Curtis and a couple of other trainers and may get a splattering of rides in the handicap. So there's still obviously that unknown. But going back to the Paul Townend factor, he does seem to have as you would expect from the Willie Mullins camp, no matter what he's dropped up on, he'll have a formidable arsenal behind him.
Yeah, well, the first thing to note is here, I went through these races, 28 races at the festival. There are 14 races, all championship races, basically, where he is already going to be riding one of the favourites, if not the favourite in it. So that there's 14 outstanding chances he has for starters before we start getting down to handicaps and the rest of it. And then if you take it that for all the professional riders, there are certain races they can't ride in anyway, some of the amateur races and so on. So out of the races they can ride in, he's going to be riding far more fancied runners in all of them. He's going to have the pick of Willie Mullins. That doesn't necessarily mean he rides the winner, but he certainly has so many chances that he definitely is clear favourite. No matter what way you draw this out, he has to be clear favourite. Then you take second favourite is Rachael Blackmore. I agree with Stephen. I think first of all, the form of the Henry de Bromhead stable would have you saying she's bad value as second favourite in real terms. And then on top of that, even if the Bromhead horses perform as well as they can, she might get 3 winners, she might get 4 winners, but ultimately you start looking at it and saying, is that enough? It probably isn't this year because Willie Mullins has such a strong hand and so is Gordon Elliott. For me, the issue with the Townend one is he's got first choice every single Willie Mullins horse. That's the bottom line throughout the week. Whereas you go to the Gordon Elliott camp, who will probably have as many winners as Willie Mullins, close enough to it anyway on the week by the look of it at this stage. But he's going to be splitting some of them between Davy Russell and Jack Kennedy. Now, at that, I still think Jack Kennedy might be a bit of value here. You're talking 9-10 to 1. He's an extremely good rider. He hasn't ridden a huge amount over the last couple of years because he's a lot of injuries for a young guy. But when he's on form and when he's riding, he is really, really top class. And he's going to be riding most of these Gordon Elliott ones. Elliott won't let him have outside rides prior to this during the season, which is why he lost the Gold Cup winners ride earlier in the season when they went to Down Royal. So Elliott thinks the world of him. Elliott is going to want to see him ride a lot of winners, and I'd expect him to give it a fair shot. Each way, certainly, I'd be disappointed in my own mind at this stage if Jack Kennedy doesn't ride more winners than Rachael Blackmore. If you could find a match bet there, I'd be very inclined to go Jack Kennedy against Rachael Blackmore, considering he's double her price to be leading rider.
Well, as I said, that's fascinating because he's pretty much exactly twice the odds of Rachael Blackmore. You can get 9 to 1 Jack Kennedy, 9 to 2 Rachael Blackmore. Where do you sit with some of the bigger priced jockeys here, Steve? Would you see any kind of lurkers in the pack who could have a really good festival? I'm going to throw in here one, Aidan Coleman, 66 to 1. I was actually going through his book of rides. It's not that bad at all. He's got John Bomb, Paisley Park, put the kettle on. I think it was 3 or 4 handicap hopes towards the top of the market. You think he's going to have a go in. There often is one jockey who kind of not necessarily going to be the top jockey at the festival, but often excels himself and perhaps, I would say, outrides their odds in order to do so. Is there anyone further down the pack you think might be a little bit forgotten?
Well, that's a good shout with Aidan Coleman, because I always think at Cheltenham, patient rides, and he's a very patient, quiet rider, generally speaking, in those big handicaps when the pace collapses is ideal. So from an each way perspective, I can hear you there. Coming back to what Vincent says, I think he's absolutely right about Jack Kennedy. And another point to note is this week, Davy Russell's missed the last 2 days. He took a heavy fall, I believe, and he was hurt. And for him to miss meetings these days, he obviously had a horrendous time of things over the last couple of years with injuries. That would be a slight worry. Let's say he's missed 2 or 3 days. I think he's supposed to be back riding in Ireland by the weekend, snow permitting, but something to bear in mind there. Someone who's a terrible price, around 10 to 1, he's the same price as Jack Kennedy, is Nico de Boinville, who, of course, be starting the meeting off with Constitution Hill and Shishkin. So let's say they both win. I hope they do. It'll give the Brits a bit of a chance. But if they don't, or one of them doesn't, or both of them doesn't, I mean, 10 to 1 is you're virtually assuming they've already won. He's not going to get any outside rides in any of the handicaps at all. Henderson won't be winning any Cheltenham handicaps. I wouldn't have thought personally. He's got a terrible record in that. It's not the way he trains. He's not aiming for big competitive handicaps with his novices and all the rest of it. So 10 to 1 de Boinville is a terrible. But I'd like a match bet Jack Kennedy against Nico de Boinville. I think I'd probably bet 5 on, to be honest with you. You might find it might be Pickham. They're both the same price. So that's something to bear in mind.
Absolutely. There was a lot of love for Jack Kennedy on this show. I think perhaps he should be second favourite, judging by the panel's comments. But just to kind of wrap up then, Stephen, it'd be Paul Townend for you. Hard to look past him.
I think odds against is a very fair price. I mean, Vincent's done the research. I mean, 14 favourites or second favourites in the graded racing. They're bound to have 3 or 4 plots lined up for the handicaps that Townend will be able to choose from. Now, I think you're going to need to probably ride 6 winners to probably win the jockey's title. So, favourites, they're going to be short prices, a lot of these Mullins horses. I
Yeah.
mean, odds against, Hills are 11 to 10. There's liquidity on the exchanges yet, so you need to wait for things to settle down. But any odds against, I think you'd be quite tempted. And as I say, if you roll over Shishkin, Constitutional, Mullins is going to have runners in these races, and Nugamin, whatever. It's not like he's on outsiders against some of the short priced horses from other stables. So yeah, fascinating. I think odds against is fair. Maybe Jack Kennedy each way, if you can play each way, and be against Rachael and be against Nico, would be my way of thinking.
Okay, no surprises you're against Nico there, Stephen. And Vincent, Jack Kennedy for you each way.
Yeah, the one thing here to say, Stephen's saying maybe 6 winners you'd need. The last couple of years, it's been that way. You've needed probably 6, 7 winners to be leading rider. But if you go back, when it used to be a 3-day festival, 2 winners was generally enough on a count back with seconds and thirds. Even a John Joe O'Neill in 1982 won it with 1 winner, which is hard to believe that someone could win leading rider with 1 winner, but he did. And then Ruby Walsh, who was 11 times champion rider, and it's now the Ruby Walsh trophy that they're riding for at Cheltenham. In his 11 wins, 5 times in the 4-day festival, 5 times he won it with only 3 winners. So you start thinking about it then, that if it does turn into some sort of a slogfest where there's winners going all over the place here with different riders, there's a lot of other guys start to come into contention, including Nico de Boinville, in fairness, because his 2 winners might nearly be enough on the first day if he happened to win the first 2 races. You just never know. We've got a lot of other younger riders coming through in Ireland. We've got the likes of Darragh O'Keefe and Sean O'Keefe, who were the winner with that Galloping Des Champs for Willie Mullins at the festival last year. You have Jordan Gainford, who he basically burst onto the scene at Cheltenham last year. He rode the Shunter to win. He rode another couple of horses, I think, to be placed last year. He's ridden a lot of winners in Ireland over the last year. Another guy, Jack Foley, is going really well. And then Brian Cooper, who was obviously a big noise going back 5-6 years ago for Gigginstown till he lost that job. He had Mrs. Milliner last year. He'll pick up a few outside rides for both Gordon Elliott and Willie Mullins, most likely, and that'll play into it somewhere. Like, as I say, Willie Mullins, as we know, it's like Aidan O'Brien in a flat classic. You just get a ride on one of his, and you've got a chance somewhere, no matter what it is in any race. So there's going to be guys picking up some of these ones, your Danny Mullinses and the rest of them, picking up some of his outside rides, and they're not 50-1 chances, no matter what race they're in. So you could easily see someone run a string of them together, get 2 or 3 of them in a handicap, and that might be quite enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, interesting thoughts there. So Paul Townend, Jack Kennedy versus the field, I think would be where we'd sum it up. We're looking at the top trainers now. Of course, unsurprisingly, Willie Mullins will be the hot pot in this market, around the twos on or there or thereabouts, in order to be top trainer, kind of obviously dovetailing with the Paul Townend factor. Stephen, come to you. I mean, look, just to play devil's advocate, are there any horses perhaps in the Mullins camp you think have been overbet, perhaps on reputation, as opposed to what they've actually achieved on the track? Or do you think twos on is a wholehearted representation of kind of what is, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I'd probably sooner back Paul Townend at odds against than Willie Mullins at 2 on, because I know that Willie Mullins has got terrific strength in depth, and as Vincent said, he can have winners with 2nd and 3rd strings. The only thing is, I think in the past, you'd get to Cheltenham, you'd open and you think, oh my God, this is a lot harder. These are very, very short prices in very competitive races. I'm not actually sure that's going to be so true this year, because I think the field size is going to be a lot smaller. I saw a very interesting graphic, I don't know whether you saw it, about the declarations for the Cheltenham Festival. That had fallen by almost 50% in the last decade and a half or so.
Handicap entries, yeah.
Yeah, handicap entries. Yeah. Quite extraordinary. Yeah. I mean, I think it's got to the point now where a lot of these races, they're not being carved up, but they can only be won by your sort of Mullins, Elliott, Henderson, de Bromhead. And I think that the days of people running sort of 50 pokes in the Supreme, for example, or the Triumph Hurdle, races like that, may be a thing of the past. So maybe all those thoughts. I mean, I'm always want to be a bookie at Cheltenham, basically. Generally speaking, there's a lot of hyped up horses who've haven't proven it in big fields on an undulating track for the first time. A lot of it's reputation. A lot of it used to be Willie Mullins, Ruby Walsh, Paul Nicol. Things were priced up on that. I'm not actually sure that's true. I mean, we've seen in the last week or two, haven't we, the anti-post markets. And what's tended to happen, almost bar anything else, is the front ones have all slowly started to shorten up. Horses like Honeysuckle have trimmed right up. Bob Ollinger, Galloping Deschamps, wherever he ends up running. And there's a lot of horses just getting shorter and shorter. And that's probably because they're going to scare away a lot of the opposition. I don't think we're going to have 20 runner races. I think it's going to be 10 and less. The Champion Hurdle, for example, looks really one-sided. I mean, if you can find, I know we've had a second in emerge from Ireland in the last week or so, but a lot of these races do look uncompetitive. I mean, coming back to what we were talking about, the Trainers' Championship, he's 2 on. I think that's probably his price, but I'd sooner back Paul Townend at odds against rather than betting bottle on Willie Mullins winning it personally. But a fascinating market. It is a fascinating market.
Well, yeah, it is fascinating. And Vincent, Gordon Elliott, the comeback king, a trainer, of course, an outstanding record at Prestbury Park. And in your view, is there a danger perhaps a few of his horses are going a little bit under the radar, as the top trainer market would suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'll have a lot of winners. My opinion on this may be proved wrong, but I think that the vast majority of races in Cheltenham will be won by either Willie Mullins or Gordon Elliott. And to me, Willie Mullins is the obvious favourite for lots of reasons, but Gordon Elliott won't be that far behind him. And I'd say if someone was looking to have a bet, Willie Mullins is a very short price to be top trainer. If he doesn't become top trainer again, it will be Gordon Elliott. There is no other option here. It's a 2-horse race, whatever way you look at it. I couldn't see anyone else. Like, what could Nicky Henderson have? Could he have 4 winners? Maybe he could. But is 4 winners going to be enough? Not a chance. Not a chance this year. I think it's between the other 2, and it's just a matter of which one has the most winners. And I'd imagine, looking at Willie Mullins, there's another bet here. I think is Willie Mullins to have 7 or more winners. I see is 4 to 6. Right. He'll surely do that. You would think he's got a very strong hand this year. You go back through his last, looking at his last 8 years, he's had 7 or more winners in half of them. He's also had 6 winners twice. So he's going to be bang on that number. 7, 8 winners, you'd imagine, is where he's heading. Maybe a little bit more, possibly, but certainly 7 or 8 winners, and 4 to 6, 7, I would have thought is a bet. Paul Nicholls, on the other hand, who we know he's not taken much of a part the last few years in Cheltenham. He's got a bit of a drubbing with a lot of his fancied horses over the last few years. It's binary numbers for him now. It's 1 or 0 or 2 or whatever. He's not going to have a whole lot of runners or winners, and yet he's odds on to have 2 or more winners. I would have thought that's a lay. Myself, it just seems like one that I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be totally surprised if he had 2 winners, but I'd be shocked if he'd any more than that. And realistically, he probably isn't going to do that. Nicky Henderson is slightly odds on. He's 4 to 5 to have 3 or more. That's likely, I suppose. In his last 9 years, I think he's had 4 winners 3 times. He's had 3 winners once and 2 winners on 3 occasions. So he generally hits a couple of winners, maybe 3, maybe 4. So 3 or more for Nicky Henderson at 4 to 5, probably not the worst bet, but I would have thought 2 or more for Paul Nicholls at 9 to 10 is probably a shade short.
Yeah, interesting thoughts there. I was going to throw in, and I was looking at the top GB trainer market. Come on, Team GB have got to have something to shout about here. I mean, mind you, we'll be 3-0 up after the Ultima on day 1, so that'll be that. Probably won't get a winner the rest of the week. But I was looking at Dan Skelton was 11 to 2 to be the top British trained trainer. Henderson 4 to 7. Looking through the Nicky Henderson squad, it's not actually that strong compared to some of the previous years. Nicky Henderson's brought a whole plethora of superstars to the table, and I actually thought Dan Skelton's got he's got Protectorat, he's got West Cork, he's got Nube Negra. I think he's got quite a few in here. I think perhaps that Langadan as well in the Martin Pipe. I think there's a few in that could run big races. He's going to have a couple of others in the handicap, so wouldn't shock me if he ended up doing pretty well. I think it's fair to say.
Well, Langadan is a very interesting one, Ed. You just touched on. He ran this week at Taunton, and to say he got a quiet ride is perhaps best how we better leave it. I think he was 14 on Betfair at the death, doubled in price, and it was dropped out last and stayed there. That was an absolute sighter, no doubt about that. And Dan's got Protectorat, of course, who's only 8 to 1 for the goal. The only thing I'll say about, Dan's horses is I actually don't fancy any of them. I mean, I don't fancy Protectorat at all. He's been tipped up by Tom Siegel this week. 8 to 1. I think it's an absolutely appalling price. Absolutely appalling. I mean, play this back when he hoses up, and I'll be completely wrong. I don't fancy Noob Negra at all either. I think he's a few lengths off it up the Cheltenham Hill. Very flattered in a messy race, and put the kettle on. And so, yeah, he's got Chitibello, of course, who now was a non-runner at Haydock for that Patents qualifier.
Yeah.
The other day. Because the ground was so heavy, so now doesn't run in the Patents. I think goes for the Martin Pipe now.
I believe. So,
owned by a pal of mine, Ian Marmion, and he's working really very strongly fancy for Cheltenham Chitibello. So there'd be some encouragement for Dan. I can see him winning a couple of the handicaps. Of course, superb story in Chitibello, and he could be 11 to 2. And I agree with Vincent about Nicky Henderson, less than 2 winners. I can hear that as well. That probably is too short a price.
Absolutely. So some interesting thoughts in regards to those markets. We look at any of the other special markets, Stephen, just very briefly to wrap up. Is there something jumping off the page? We touched on it at the top of the show. The Ruby Walsh Trophy, I think, as Vincent says, it's called now, in terms of numbers of winners for Ireland and GB. I mean, how are you assessing it?
I think these are, well, actually, I'm going to sound like racing blogger and Harry Finley now, but I just looked on the exchange this morning, and Ireland are 10 to 1 on to win the Presbyterian Cup, as it's called. Most winners at the festival. I wouldn't want to lay 10 on. I mean, flipping it, 10 on. What's got to happen for them not to win it? I mean, there'd have to be a tsunami, wouldn't there, really, to stop any of the boats coming across? I mean, that literally. I mean, 10 on. I mean, 10%. I've seen a lot worse 10 on chances. I must admit, I'd be amazed if that didn't cop. The margins you get up to how many winners, again on the exchange, 19 or more is virtually pick 'em. Well, I think I'd be a bit higher than that. I don't think English trainers are going to have 9 winners, which is what you're talking about, to get that beat. I think that's a big ask. I really do. A few of the handicaps, sure. Maybe the Supreme, Shishkin, maybe you're giving 5, 6, 7 a nudge, but I don't know. It's pick 'em, 19 or more Irish winners. I think that is a very fair price. I could only go one way on that.
I'm sticking to my 18-10 prediction for the.
Right.
I'm confident.
That'll be upsetting.
We'll get the mole victory of reaching double figures in a drubbing. Vincent, have you looked into those markets yourself?
I have, yeah, and I'm agreeing with Stephen here. I think there's value in the number of Irish winners. Look, it's a graph going up like that the last few years with the Irish winners, and this year particularly, we look to have an unbelievably strong hand in virtually every race throughout the festival. I worked this out as well. I've gone through it. There are 12 races where we have basically won them already. When you start looking at that, and that's not far off the truth in the betting situation here. You're talking about some of the races with the first 8 in the betting. How are we going to get that beat? It takes a lot to say what horse is going to beat it. Like you look at that mare's hurdle, first 8 in the betting are Irish. You've got the National Hunt Chase, first 5 are Irish. You're talking 20 to 1 chances are going to have to come and beat one of these for it to be a UK win. And then that's not to say it won't be a 20 to 1 Irish chance beating the top 5 in the market as well. You've got the Ballymore as well. We've 8 of the first 10 in the betting in that. You've got the bumper. That's already won by us. When you start looking at the level of horses that are at the top of that market, I'd be shocked if there's not an Irish winner of that. With Facile Vega, American Mike, and the likes of them, and Willie Mullins has some serious other horses in that as well. The Ryanair, I think 9 of the first 10 in the betting, including the odds-on favourite, are trained in Ireland. So that's a given already. You can just mark that one up. The Triumph, first 3 in the betting, and there are 3 hot pots in that particular race at the minute. It'd be a big surprise if one of them gets turned over. The Gold Cup, 7 of the first 8 in the betting. Again, it's very hard to see where you're going to get an English winner there. You've got the Mare's Chase, 7 of the first 9 in the betting are currently Irish as well. So what I was looking at here is saying last year you have 23 Irish winners to 5 UK. There's no reason to say that the Irish are going to have a worse week than they had last year, particularly. We know there were 5 English winners last year. There were 8 other races where they finished second, fair enough. So you could say, if things work their way and they get the run of this, they could have as many as 13 winners. I think they did well to get 5 last year by the look of it. And you're looking again with this domination, seems to be even more so. So you're dealing with 20 winners. What price is 20 winners?
5 to 4.
5 to 4. Yeah. I thought there's a case for saying 20 winners or more and then back 21 winners or more, 22, 23, 24. 24 winners or more is 14 to 1 at the moment. That's not a bad price, considering it's only one more than they had last year, and you're getting 14 to 1 about it.
Yeah. Well, I think
there may well be value here.
Yeah, I agree with Vincent here, because I think what happened last year is everyone thinks, well, it was 23-5. That's never going to happen again. I think it's more likely to happen again, to be honest, because what's happened is people like Paul Nicholls, Dan Skelton were red in the face, fuming last year. And what they're going to do this year is not run. They're going to run a handful of horses. They're not going to run 6 horses in handicaps and all the rest of it. They're going to save them for Aintree.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sorry to jump in, Steve. Just to back your point up, I think Paul's only got 14 for the entire meeting.
Yeah, it was a chastening experience. They half knew it was coming, but it was a slap in the face, and it's got to the point where it's sort of white flag. We've got absolutely no chance. We're not going to run. And I think that's and these are, I'm just talking about the top trainers here.
Yeah.
Obviously, Kim Bailey suddenly hit form. I think he might have a handicap winner or two. He's suddenly, having had a really quiet season, been much better in the last week or so. So, they're competitive hot races. I'm not saying they're going to win all of them, but I think from a pricing point of view, 19 or more is virtually pick 'em on the exchange. Yeah. I think that's a very fair price. I mean, I suspect in a couple of weeks' time that'll be 6th of all, 7th of all on, and the market would have moved up, as Vincent has said, to sort of 20, 21 will be pick 'em rather than 19, and I think that's closer. But 14 to 1. I mean, you'll have a bit of fun if you roll over the first couple of favourites, won't you? I mean, I wouldn't want to be betting 14 on. They don't have 24 winners if something goes wrong in those first 2 races. It's a long old week trying to find 4 or 5. I know you're looking for 10, Ed, but
well, I say we'll be 3-0 up after the Ultima. So
it's possible. It's possible. And of course, we'll all stupid.
I can lay off then. I can lay off. So to sum up, 20 unanimous across the panel there for Vincent and Stephen. 20 runners or more, 5 to 4. Essentially, get on, fill your boots. It's going to be an absolute Irish wash again of winners in the winners' enclosure. It's becoming Dublin Racing Festival Part 2, isn't it? But anyway, there's some good fun here. I hope you've enjoyed that at home. Some interesting insight and views on the jockeys, trainers, and the specials markets. Of course, don't forget, keep in touch with irishracing.com for all the latest news and views and all the breaking stories, of course, surrounding Cheltenham Festival, which is just under 3 weeks away now. And of course, bettingexpert.com as well to follow all of Stephen Harris's tips. Many thanks for watching at home. We'll do it all again soon. Bye for now.